Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic that a lot of you enjoy, so let's do it. What is something strange or haunting that you've seen while out at sea and still can't explain? Please remember to like, share, say ahoy, and subscribe. Growing up, my family had a cottage on a small island in the Baltic Sea off the coast of Sweden. This happened in the late 70s during the Cold War, when Russian subs were often observed in Swedish territorial waters. Our island did have a military installation on it and was off limits to foreigners. My dad and I were fishing from Grandpa's old wooden rowboat, just drifting along a couple of hundred yards offshore, when all of a sudden, the head of a diver slowly rose to the surface a couple of yards off to the side of the boat. He slowly turned around, spotted us, and disappeared beneath the water again. We saw divers on several occasions, but never that close, and once we also saw the conning tower of a submarine. I spent 7 years sailing a boat around the Caribbean. I sailed alone 90% of the time. Not too many weird things, to be honest. Whales got too close for comfort a few times. I had auditory hallucinations several times due to sleep deprivation, downside to sailing solo. That was always a bit scary. Weirdest was sailing between the British Virgin Islands and St. Martin. Moonless night, pitch black, total flat calm. Flat seas are rare in that area. The ocean lit up with what I could only assume were some sort of glowing jellyfish. These globes in the water would flash bright green for a second and vanish, hundreds of them. And they were not small, several feet in diameter. This lasted for about 30 minutes. It was beautiful and surreal. Never saw anything before or since like it in over 20,000 miles of open ocean sailing. I was in a 40-some foot boat in my teens. I know next to nothing about ships, but I commuted by boat almost every day, so I've been on them a fair amount. This was in Lake Superior, where I never knew the waves to be very big, and they would usually cancel the ride if it were the case. One day, we had a single massive wave come out of nowhere and nearly flip us over. It was taller than our boat and drenched everyone, but I had been looking in the direction where it hit, and there was nothing. Just a momentary 15-foot wall of water, which hit us, and the lake was calm again. I was in the middle of the ocean on a sailboat several years ago. It was the middle of the night, and I couldn't sleep, so I decided to sit up for a little while. After a couple of minutes, staring idly at the ocean, I see something a couple hundred feet away. It's drifting closer and closer. When it's finally close enough for me to see what it is, I see it as a life preserver with a tennis shoe stuck to it. I know there were probably an explanation, but it still creeped me to see it in the middle of the ocean. Merchant mariner here. A few times I've been in really dense fog, so dense that I couldn't see the bow of the boat I was on. And it's no fun at all, especially if you're in tight quarters. Radar and GPS are your friends in those situations, but even if you know where you are and that there's nothing around you, there's still something deeply unsettling about being lost in a cold, silent mist. Also, got to swim one time in 3 miles deep water. That was pretty cool. Was delivering a boat from North Carolina to the US Virgin Islands, and we got becalmed mid-ocean, so we went over the side for a swim, while holding onto the trailing lines and leaving someone on board, of course. Looking down into the water was like looking up into space, the same sensation of infinity, but it was strange to be floating, almost flying on top of it. The light disappeared into this deep, ultimate blue. That's a beautiful description of the water that I think any of us that like water would love to be in. Could only imagine. I mean, I've sailed a lot from the military, but I've never been in water that deep or that far out. On deployment, observed a fireball in the Indian Ocean. 100% convinced it was a large meteor, but it remained solid until it disappeared, and it abruptly angled like it did something, albeit at a very shallow angle. When I say fireball, I mean fireball, not a shooting star like you can see on a typical dark night, not in the city. Was a watchman on a dinner cruise vessel, watched as dolphins encircled a school of bait fish, drawing the circle tighter and tighter until they plowed straight through the ball and nailed the fish. Did not understand how sophisticated and murderous dolphins were, or how well they planned their attack. I spent a week on a boat on a river. One day I was kind of zoned out on the deck when something in the corner of my eye caught my attention. I turned around just in time and saw a whale's tail going back into the water, like the cliche pictures you see of a tail sticking out from the surface. I was sure I saw it, like 100%. But then I thought about the probability of a whale navigating its way up a river through 3 locks just to do some flips and shit, and chalked it up to my brain making it up somehow. It still confuses me. I've been hunting with my dad in Finland for over 10 years now, and I know the area like the back of my hands. My dad's been hunting there for over 30 years. One night, we were heading to an island and suddenly something started blasting water in the middle of the sea. Like there was a rock just beneath the surface and the waves were bouncing from it. We knew for a fact that there wasn't a rock there. It looked weird, so we went over to have a closer look, but it was so dark we couldn't tell what the thing splashing was. It looked like it was doing some of animals. My only theory to date is that it was a seal that had been caught in a fishing net, and it had then broke the net and made its way to the open sea and was trying to get to the surface but couldn't make it. This was an old boat built in 1926, wood hull. At the time, we had it set up for dragging sea scallops. Once in a while, we would be out on an overnight trip, and you would be laying in your bunk in the middle of the night listening to the waves lapping against the bow, and all of a sudden, you would hear a sharp knocking against the side of the wood hull from the outside. Sometimes from under the boat, sometimes higher up along the sides, but always where it would be at least a couple feet underwater. Sometimes just one or two sharp knocks, sometimes a flutter like the drumming of fingers on a desk, but very distinct and, dare I say, deliberate. And it would usually come in waves, like it would happen multiple times over the course of a few minutes and then not again for the rest of the night. It came up in conversation a few times with some of the other guys, and the only somewhat plausible explanation was that it was actually sea scallops swimming up and bouncing off the bottom of the boat. The theory was that when a scallop bed became overcrowded or otherwise unsuitable, that some of them would swim up into the water column and drift along with the upper current to find new areas to populate, and the sound we heard was their shells hitting the boat as we drifted through a school of them. I have no idea if there's any science behind that to back that up, and it sounds pretty dubious to me, but it's not like I have a better explanation for it. I mean, besides mermaids. I appreciate your rational approach to what the sound could be, but at the same time, mermaids? Okay. We would sometimes see lights out in the distance at night. I had a few people tell me that some of these lights were so bright that it felt like it was like the sun had come up. I hadn't seen a light like that, but I have seen what looked like a plane flying at night. It would change directions and fly the other way. This happened 5 times in the span of about 2 minutes. This is something I cannot explain logically. How can something change directions that fast, at that speed, in that kind of movement? Oddest thing I've ever seen. This wasn't on the ocean, but an inland lake, which actually makes the story even weirder. Lake Kagawong is the second biggest lake on the Manitoulin Island. So big, in fact, that it actually has its own island with it. While the lake itself is huge, it's not actually connected to the Great Lakes other than by a river that goes over a waterfall. This means that only a small recreational boat capable of being launched off a trailer can enter the lake at the 3 or 4 small launch areas. That being said, one day when my dad and I were out in our 23-foot bow rider, which was one of the bigger boats on the lake, when we spotted a large black ship slowly moving towards one of the islands on the far side of the lake. It wasn't a sailing ship or anything you'd expect a ghost ship to look like. In fact, it looked like a super yacht you'd see in places like Monaco. It disappeared behind the island, which was large enough to hide it entirely. We drove the boat over toward it, but by the time we got over there, the mystery vessel was gone. We drove the whole perimeter of the lake and saw no trace of this massive boat. While again, the lake is plenty big enough to accommodate a vessel of this size. Hell, you could comfortably drive the Titanic around in there. There's no way a boat of that size could have gotten into that lake. There's no navigable waterway connecting the lake to the big water, and the only launch ramps are very small. And even then, that ship was too big to be hauled on a truck, even if it were shorelines are pretty rocky and steep in most places, and there's nowhere to set up the cranes and other necessary equipment required to actually get a vessel of that size into the water. Nobody ever saw the ship again after that. No one else on the lake had ever seen it either, so we were never given an explanation. I worked on private yachts for 3 years. When out at sea, you have to do watches, which means you are on the bridge for a couple hours at a time monitoring all of the systems. Boats run on autopilot and generally only need adjustments to the course every couple of hours or so. So being on watch generally means you're stuck looking at the same expansive gray water for a couple hours, waiting for something to happen and trying to ignore the fact that you're seasick. If you're a fan of watching paint dry, being on watch is the job for you. It's also important to note that everyone working on a boat carries a radio, and that radio has to be on at all times. Now, in this boat, I had the 2 to 6 watch. That meant from 2 to 6 a.m. and 2 to 6 p.m., I had to be on the bridge. In between watches, I would just sleep on account of being sleep deprived and nauseous 100% of my waking hours. We had just entered into the Bahamas island chain around 11:30 a.m., so the water had calmed down a bit. I was dead to the world, getting in my final hours of nap time before my watch started up, when my radio crackled to life with the calls of "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday, everyone to the bridge, we have a boat on fire." Now, Mayday is the only said over the radio when there could be imminent loss of life or limb. It's the "oh shit" button of the maritime world. The radio equivalent of SOS. The Titanic is effing sinking, and we only have half the lifeboats we need. It's a bigger adrenaline rush than cocaine, and within seconds I was out of bed and on the bridge. Sure as shit. Is brown, there is a 20-foot sailboat about 500 feet in front of us engulfed in a ball of flames. It went up in about 10 seconds and burned like Australia. So we launched our rescue tender, grabbed the first aid kit, and set out to get as many bodies off the boat as possible. In a miraculous stroke of luck, there was only one person on board, and the only piece of him that sustained injury were his eyebrows. We pulled him out of the water, got him checked over, and brought him with us to our next port. He lost everything except his life, and as we pulled away, his boat sank in 800 feet of water. Make no mistake, boats are dangerous. Fiberglass goes up in flames fast, and when you're in the open ocean, your chance of survival are slim. He was lucky we were there, because it's not often you get two boats in the same place like that. Keep your EPIRBS close, and always have a life raft on board. Other than that, I saw the New Year's Eve fireworks off of Richard Branson's island in the British Virgin Islands. He put on a great display every year. The stars are brilliant too. If the whole world shut off the lights for one night, you wouldn't believe what you could see. With the vastness of the open oceans and seas, it really is a miracle that you happened to be there at the same time that this person's boat burst into flames. Dangerous, yes, but miracle. So great for him, and a good story to tell. When I was in the Navy, I was stationed on a cruiser, and that ship was certainly haunted. More than once I shared a smoke late at night with someone vaguely familiar, but no one knew who I was talking about, and the description didn't match anyone. We never really talked other than mention the quality of the seas at the time. It's a nice night, or looks like a storm is coming, and just watched the horizon on night sky a couple times, commenting on the constellations that were out. Never anything malevolent, but a little unnerving when I could never find that dude and people thought I was too sleep deprived. This happened when I was in the Navy back in the early 90s. We were sailing from Guam to Australia and were days away from land in every direction. I was standing at lookout on the fantail and hadn't heard anything over the sound-powered phone about any sighted contacts. I'm looking over the starboard side when I see us pass a red light no more than 100 feet away. I try to call it into the bridge, but my phone isn't working. In the 10 seconds it took me to swap my phone to another connection and look back up, the light was gone. This was a single solitary red light, no green light and no white lights, so it didn't appear to me to be a boat or a sailing vessel. To this day I can't explain what it was or why the phone stopped working. A sound-powered phone doesn't use power, it uses sound to work. I do travel to the UK and Scotland a lot, and I take a ferry to mainland Europe, and I decide I head out to the deck to get some fresh air and see if I could get a good signal to contact my family. I get out there, and it's dark, and everything is normal, and all of a sudden, the boat slammed something hard and flung me to the deck, and I remember my visions getting fuzzy, and there being a loud bang again. I thought we hit a ferry. I ran up to the command deck because my friend was the captain, and he said they don't know what happened. He said there were no leaks or fires, They had a medic come and check on me because my head was bleeding from the fall. We made it to the mainland, and I got off, looked at the boat, and noticed there was a big dent in the hull. My friend said we probably hit or whales, but I've never known whales to cause that big of a dent.